I never thought I would be the kind of man who kept secrets. For years, I believed loyalty defined me, that my relationship with Daniel was the anchor that held me steady. But somewhere along the line, comfort replaced passion, and silence filled the spaces where laughter used to live. Nights turned into routines, days into obligations, and while Daniel remained present, I often felt invisible. That kind of loneliness isn't loud. It creeps in quietly, pressing on you until one day you realize you've been starving for touch, for attention, for anything that reminds you you're alive. That was the state I was in when I noticed him, Ethan. He wasn't a stranger, not exactly. He lived only a few houses down, the kind of neighbor who helped carry groceries or exchange casual smiles across the fence. We never spent much time alone, though. Most of our conversations had been small, polite, nothing more than the standard pleasantries. But recently I started to notice the way his eyes lingered a moment too long, the way his voice lowered slightly when he spoke to me. There was something charged in the air, a subtle energy I pretended not to recognize. One evening, I found myself at his place. It wasn't planned. Daniel had gone out of town for work, and Ethan had invited me over casually, saying he needed help moving some heavy boxes in his garage. It sounded harmless, but even before I stepped through his door, I felt that uneasy excitement, the kind you get before doing something you know you shouldn't. The garage smelled faintly of wood and engine oil, cluttered with tools, shelves, and half-finished projects. Ethan handed me a bottle of water, and we joked as we worked, our laughter echoing in the dim space. But beneath the light-heartedness was an unspoken tension neither of us dared acknowledge. I caught myself watching the flex of his arms as he lifted, the way sweat traced lines down his neck. He wasn't trying to show off, but I noticed everything. Too much, maybe. At one point, he bent down to grab something, and that's when I saw it, his tool, a large wrench, gripped casually in his hand. But the image burned itself into my mind with a double meaning I couldn't escape. My eyes widened instinctively, and Ethan caught the look. For a heartbeat, we froze. His gaze met mine, sharp and knowing, and in that silent moment, everything changed. I should have looked away. I should have laughed it off, shifted the mood back to safe ground. Instead, I held his stare. The air thickened, as though the walls themselves leaned in, urging us closer. My pulse quickened, and a rush of heat surged through me. It wasn't just about the wrench. It was about him, about me, about the hunger I'd been denying for far too long. Ethan finally broke the silence, his voice lower, almost testing me. "You okay?" The question was simple, but the way he asked it made my throat dry. I nodded too quickly, fumbling for composure, but the damage was done. He knew. I knew. And in that shared awareness, the boundary I had clung to for years wavered. We kept working, but it wasn't the same. Every brush of his arm against mine, every accidental touch, sparked like fire. I laughed too hard at his jokes, stood too close without meaning to, and all the while my mind replayed that instant, his tool in his hand, my eyes betraying me, his smile that said he understood more than I wanted him to. When the boxes were finally stacked, we sat down for a break. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was heavy, charged, full of possibilities neither of us dared name aloud. I sipped my water, avoiding his gaze, but every nerve in my body was attuned to him. That's when I realized how far I had already gone. Nothing had happened yet. Not really, but my heart knew better. Infidelity doesn't start with a kiss or a touch. It begins with a look, a moment, a choice to step closer instead of pulling away. As I left his garage that night, my chest ached with conflicting emotions. Guilt gnawed at me, but so did anticipation. Something had been set in motion, and deep down, I knew there was no turning back. The following days were a blur of restlessness. At night, I lay beside Daniel, listening to his steady breathing, but my mind wandered back to Ethan's garage, to that stare, that unspoken acknowledgement of desire. Guilt pressed hard against me, yet the memory lingered like a forbidden song stuck in my head. I told myself it was just a moment, meaningless, but deep down I knew it was only the beginning. Ethan didn't make things easier. The morning after, I caught him outside, watering his plants. He smiled in a way that felt deliberate, half playful, half dangerous. My heart stumbled in my chest. It wasn't the kind of smile neighbors exchanged. It was a reminder, a silent whisper of the tension we both tried to ignore. I forced myself to wave casually, but my eyes betrayed me, drifting over him longer than they should have. He noticed. Later that week, Daniel called to say his work trip was being extended. I should have felt disappointment, but instead a strange exhilaration coursed through me. The absence created space, and in that emptiness, temptation had room to grow. That evening, Ethan texted, "You busy?" Simple, harmless on the surface, but I read between the lines. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen before I replied. "Not really. Why?" His answer came quickly. "Come over. I've got something I could use your help with." I told myself it was innocent, that I was just being neighborly. But when I walked into his living room, I knew there was nothing innocent about it. The air felt charged, like stepping into a storm before the first drop of rain. He was wearing a plain t-shirt and jeans, but somehow he carried himself with an ease that drew me in. We started with casual conversation, sitting opposite each other on the couch. His voice was calm, steady, but beneath it I sensed the same restraint I was fighting. Every laugh stretched too long. Every pause felt deliberate. At one point, his knee brushed mine, a small touch, but my body reacted instantly, heat rushing through me. About the other night, Ethan said softly, breaking the fragile surface of our pretense. My throat tightened. "What about it?" He leaned closer, his eyes fixed on mine. "You looked at me like you wanted something." The honesty of his words cut through me. I should have denied it, should have laughed it off, but instead I sat frozen, caught between fear and longing. My silence was its own confession. Ethan didn't rush. He placed his hand gently on mine, giving me the chance to pull away. I didn't. The warmth of his skin against mine felt like a spark on dry kindling. Slowly, deliberately, he closed the distance, and before I could second-guess myself, his lips brushed mine. The kiss was tentative at first, almost cautious, but it carried a weight years of neglect had left me craving. I kissed him back, my chest tight, with a mixture of need and guilt. For a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. There was only the taste of him, the press of his body, the unspoken acknowledgement that we had crossed the line. I thought of Daniel then, his face, his trust. The image stabbed through me, but it wasn't strong enough to stop me. The desire had taken root, and resistance felt impossible. Ethan pulled me closer, his breath hot against my ear, and whispered, "I've wanted this for a long time." The words undid me. I clung to him, desperate, hungry, my hands tracing the shape of him like I was memorizing something forbidden. Time lost all meaning as we surrendered to what had been simmering between us for weeks. When it was over, silence filled the room. We sat side by side, breathing hard, not daring to look directly at each other. My heart pounded with exhilaration and dread. I had done it. I had betrayed Daniel. And yet, even with guilt curling in my chest, a dark part of me already wanted more. Ethan finally broke the silence. "No one has to know," he said. His voice was steady, but his hand trembled slightly as he reached for mine again. I nodded. Though my stomach twisted, his words were meant to reassure, but they echoed like a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. The morning after, I woke with a hollow ache in my chest. Daniel had called late the night before to check in, his voice warm, steady, unaware. I answered with the same practiced tenderness I had always used, but every word felt heavy, as though coated in lies. When I hung up, I sat in silence, staring at my reflection in the darkened screen of my phone, realizing that nothing about me looked the same anymore. The guilt was suffocating. I replayed Ethan's touch, his kiss, the sound of his breath in my ear, and each memory tightened the noose around my conscience. Yet beneath the weight of remorse, another feeling lingered: desire, a dangerous, intoxicating longing that refused to die down. That contradiction split me in two: loyal partner on one side, secret betrayer on the other. When Daniel returned a few days later, the house felt different. He greeted me with the same easy affection as always, setting down his suitcase, kissing my cheek, asking about my week. I smiled and answered, but my voice trembled at the edges. My eyes avoided his, because I feared if I looked too closely he would see the betrayal written all over me. Every interaction became a minefield. At dinner, when Daniel asked casually about the neighbors, my fork froze halfway to my mouth. When he touched my hand across the table, my skin burned with the memory of Ethan's. The smallest things unraveled me, and I found myself retreating, speaking less, hiding more. And then there was Ethan. He didn't press, didn't text, but whenever I saw him outside, our eyes locked, and the silence said everything. Sometimes he would nod subtly, a small acknowledgement of what we shared. Other times, his gaze lingered a little too long, and I had to turn away before Daniel noticed. One afternoon, as I was walking back from the store, Ethan passed me on the sidewalk. His voice was low, almost casual. "We should talk." I shook my head. "We can't." But even as I said it, I felt the pull. The memory of his hands, his lips, the way he made me feel seen, alive, gnawed at me. I wanted to be strong, to close the door firmly, but weakness shadowed every step I took. At night, lying in bed beside Daniel, I stared at the ceiling, wondering what this meant. Was what I felt for Ethan just lust? Or was it something deeper, something that revealed truths I had been too afraid to confront? If Daniel truly loved me, why did I still feel so unseen, so untouched? The questions circled endlessly, leaving me restless and hollow. One evening, Daniel noticed. "You've been quiet lately," he said softly. I forced a smile. "Just tired, that's all." But I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes, a shadow of suspicion he quickly masked. That single moment terrified me more than anything else. If he knew, if he found out, everything we had built would collapse in an instant. And yet, even that fear didn't erase the echo of Ethan's touch that haunted me. The secret grew heavier with each passing day. It poisoned my laughter, hollowed out my words, and carved a distance between me and Daniel that he couldn't name, but I could feel. Still, I couldn't bring myself to confess. Confession would end it all, but silence allowed me to keep both worlds, though neither felt whole anymore. Ethan remained close, always within reach, always a possibility. And I hated how much I wanted that possibility. One night, after Daniel had fallen asleep, I stood by the window, staring at Ethan's house down the street. A single light burned in his room. I wondered if he was awake, if he was thinking of me, if he was waiting for me to make the choice I had been avoiding. That's when I understood the truth. The affair wasn't over. It had only just begun. In the weeks that followed, I lived like a man split down the middle. By day, I played the role Daniel expected of me, partner, companion, the man who smiled at dinner and asked about his work. But beneath that polished surface, another version of me stirred restlessly, a version that belonged to Ethan, a version that woke in the middle of the night, aching for the touch I swore I would resist. The secrecy was its own intoxication. Every time I saw Ethan, even from a distance, my pulse raced. He had become more careful, no longer initiating conversations where Daniel might overhear, but the silence between us carried more weight than words ever could. When our eyes met, the air thickened, heavy with the memory of what we'd done and the promise of what we might do again. Daniel, meanwhile, had begun to notice the distance. He didn't accuse me outright, but his questions sharpened. "Is everything okay with you?" he asked one evening as we sat on the couch, the glow of the television washing over us. "Yes," I replied too quickly. "You seem distracted," he pressed, his tone soft but searching. I forced a laugh, deflecting. "Work's just been a lot." He nodded, though his eyes lingered on me longer than usual. That look unsettled me more than anything Ethan had ever done. Suspicion was beginning to form, and with it, the fragile balance I had been maintaining threatened to collapse. Yet, despite the risk, the craving didn't fade. If anything, it intensified. One afternoon, when Daniel was at work, I stepped outside to grab the mail. Ethan was across the street, leaning against his car. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. But the way he stood there, arms crossed, eyes fixed on me, sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't invitation, it was challenge. Later that night, alone with my thoughts, I replayed that stare. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the sink, water running over them as though it might wash away the guilt. But guilt couldn't erase desire, and desire had already carved its place inside me. The truth was undeniable. I wanted more. And wanting more meant making a choice. That choice presented itself sooner than I expected. Daniel announced he'd be away again for another brief trip, just 2 nights. He said it casually over breakfast, sipping coffee as though it were nothing. But to me, it was everything. The moment the door closed behind him, silence filled the house, thick and echoing. I stared at my phone, Ethan's name glowing faintly on the screen, my thumb hovering over it like I'd so many times before. I told myself I wouldn't call, that I'd stay strong. But the hunger inside me screamed louder than reason. I typed 3 words before I could stop myself. "Are you home?" His reply came almost instantly, always. When I arrived at his door, the air between us was already charged. Neither of us spoke at first. We didn't need to. The silence was louder than words, a silence built from weeks of denials, stolen glances, and the echo of one forbidden night. Finally, Ethan broke it. "You came back." I swallowed hard, my voice low, trembling. I couldn't stay away. His smile was faint, but his eyes burned with something dangerous. He stepped aside, holding the door open. My feet moved forward, even as my conscience screamed to turn back. As the door shut behind me, sealing us in, I realized the truth I had been running from. What began as a single mistake was no longer a secret memory. It was becoming a pattern, a path I was choosing willingly. And once you choose it, there's no pretending you didn't.